Hey everybody, what's up? It's me, it's Pete, and I am back for another edition of Pete Plays Tyranny. Today, we are on part 19, getting super close to 20, and we still have a lot of people to talk to in this general area. The Spire, we hired some people last time, messed around with the Spire. We got an open conversation with Lantry we have to have, so let's dig into it.
Right. As you command.
Time to talk to some folks. Let's start by talking to Verse.
At your service, Fatebinder.
Verse bows with an added
What do
flourish.
you need?
I would like to discuss your apparent connection with Barik.
You've just got to know, don't you?
I do.
I suppose there's no point in hiding it. Barik and I are siblings. We share a father, if little else.
What? What the fuck? No. Yeah, you do.
I try not to think too much about some northern merchant dropping anchor in my mother's port, but it happened. And
Hell yeah.
the unfortunate result stands proudly before you.
How did you two become aware of
There
this?
were a lot of lazy days during the conquest, and among other things, I spent my off hours using messenger birds as target practice. You should have seen Ash's anger when he heard that was going on.
This is the first huge plot twist, other than the fact the voice in that rat is stabbing me in the back and trying to ruin my life.
One day, I snagged a bird that flew from the hands of a proud northern daddy. The missive was about the goings-on at the family farm. I recognized the name and handwriting from a note in my mother's belongings. There weren't too many people named Barik in the army, so tracking him down was no challenge. I cornered him in camp, and we shared a few heated words. Some blackmail, even.
She tried to extort rings from me, and I was having none of it. Not even Graven Ash would think less of me for our father's indiscretion.
I like your confidence, but my ring belt is feeling a little light these days. Maybe you want to take me up on that offer, or I can start whispering in disfavored ears. Think about it.
Do you even like each other, your brother and sister?
I tried to get along with that ironclad knot of repression, but it would seem he's having none of it. Good riddance, then.
Yeah.
The war has tossed us together, but nothing says we have to keep that going. The most we do for each other is try not to get the other one killed, which is more than you can say for most disfavored in Scarlet Chorus.
How has this affected you, Barik? How does it feel to have Verse as your sister?
Well, Verse has a nasty habit of jabbering in my ear and making this war intolerable. I plan on parting ways and returning to the north at first convenience. My father will answer for his infidelity.
Oh my.
Beyond that, I am happy to consider myself in every way unaffected. My superiors once accused me of having an impulsive streak, but I have worked to suppress it at every turn.
Good for you, Barik. There's no reason for you to be at all
When you
human.
go back home, send father my fondest greetings and thanks. If he hadn't gone to ground on my mother's dry dock, I might not be here today.
That's gross.
My heritage was a point of pride and distinction.
Specifically dry dock, not sex.
Not that you would care.
Have you noticed any significant impact, Verse?
I've asked myself about that several times, but unfortunately I don't have what you'd call a definitive answer.
Okay.
The Northerners put a lot of meaning behind family and blood. Seems arbitrary to me, but I don't want to discredit it entirely. I told you about what happened to my Scarlet Fury sisters. The hesitation I experienced. Sometimes I wonder if that wasn't because of my connection to Barik. He's stubborn, regimented. Everything I'm not. I suppose there's no telling for sure, but if I had to guess... Yeah. Sometimes I get messed up in my head, and learning I had a brother has helped me understand that better. What do you need?
I think this would just party her up with me, right?
And I seem to be missing a game.
Cancel. I had to see the dialogue. Swordbreaker, you got anything? Let us war with each other in the spirit of instruction. That just sounds like a Futurama line. I'd like to train. Wield your weapon and do not relent. If you are disarmed, you keep fighting or you die. Thus is the way of the warrior. I don't have much money anymore. Like at all. I spent it all training. We're gonna skip this. Yeah, we're not gonna train. But thank you, sir. Did we talk to you yet, sir? Sadis? Yeah, he's a trainer. Okay. We gotta talk to Ebb.
Second Spire has awoken to your presence. This is fascinating. I admit, enviable. If it turns out your connection to the Spires invites death and woe, my jealousy might wane a bit. I've been mulling over that structure we found atop Vendrian's well. Would you be opposed to me studying the sculpture in closer detail? I'd perhaps work a spell or two near the structure. Simple cantrips of Gravelight by which to read and inspect, but I will not poke or shove the thing in any way physical or mystical.
What's Gravelight? Gravelight is the magical term for the light of the moon Terratis Grave, specifically when harnessed and manipulated for nefarious purposes. While the moon's rays are normally incapable of causing so much as a mild sunburn, the Tidecasters have long studied magic that can concentrate these rays into bolts and beams of searing doom. The Tidecasters have spent centuries trying to mimic and control the moon's tidal pull on the oceans, and will often mention that diverting moonlight is the easy stuff compared to pulling and pushing tides. But modern times have forced the School of Tides to concentrate on the more martial applications of this magic. Okay, cool. You do not need to ask my permission, or you may observe and take notes only, no magic or meddling. If you think it wise, of course, or no, I don't want you tampering. You don't need to ask my permission.
Next time we have a good moonlit night, I best settle in and see what sort of magic perturbations I can sense from the sculpture. What is it you need?
We should discuss matters at hand.
Regarding the Scarlet Chorus. Narad is worse than Kairos, yet many in the chorus were my countrymen. Most of them fighting because they will suffer worse indignities if they do not. So I must ask, what is your goal behind working with the voices of Narad?
It's a means to destroy the disfavored. The voice of Narad is the mightiest of the Archons, or glare silently. I don't think it's any of those reasons. I just like chaos. Glaring silently is probably going to gain me some fear. Let's just say he's the mightiest of Archons. She's not going to be happy with that, but it sounds like a good excuse.
And that appeals to you? Well, you know this little club of miscreants better than I. If raw, unmitigated power gets you off, perhaps you and the Archon of Secrets were meant for each other.
Yeah.
Ask away.
Let's speak of magic.
You know, I normally charge for this, but for you...
Ebb smiles, awaiting your query. What can you tell me about your magical tradition?
Now, you know that's a very personal question. The knowledge I have is a centuries-old gift from the Archon of Tides. I would sooner discard my life than the sanctity of that gift. I will speak in generalities only.
That's fine. Ask worst. I can do is not tell you. That was the correct inflection. Tell me about how you influenced Terratis Grave. Trade secret. Not one I'm going to talk about. The School of Tides dies with me, and so too will this. And do not bother trying to change my mind on this matter. It'll just get ugly quick. Tell me how you influence ice, mist, and other forms of water. With years of training. Now look, most of those secrets have already been stolen ages ago by the sages. Doesn't mean I'm going to tell you just because the secret's already out. But it means you can go ask someone else if you really feel so entitled to know. And before you ask, I've learned plenty from knowledge stolen by the sages. But no, I don't know how to do what Ebb does. Magically or otherwise. Can you teach me what you know? I suppose I am capable of it, but no. The secrets of the Archon of Tides dies with me. I command you to teach me what you know. You can order me into a battle I can't win, and I'll follow that order to my death. But I'm taking what I know with me to the end. That get me to fear too? Yeah. But if something happens to you, who will preserve your school's teachings?
Oh, I don't know. The Archon of not my problem? This is all I have left that makes me special. Preserving the knowledge for the coxswains about to inherit the tears is not on my agenda. What's it worth to you? Lantry's still beating hard. Throw in a charm bracelet made of his beard and we're talking. Look, I'm all for the advancement of knowledge, but this is absurd. I'd settle for Kairos' severed head. Sure, bring me that. Silver platter optional. And I'll teach you everything I know about magic, and maybe even some of what I know about tying knots. Okay, forget I asked. What are the philosophical teachings of your magic? There's a question I can answer. It would surprise you little to learn that we see all things, people, war, seasons, to be cyclical, waxing and waning through their various forms like the tides and the light of Tyranny's grave. The mind is limited. We're born and spend our lives dodging death. We expect all stories to have a beginning and an end. We assume all things start and stop just like us. In truth, all things are cycles, some by matter of minutes, others by matter of years or lifetimes. In the school of tides, we appreciate patterns of all sorts. Most are called to the depths. Others find their interests skybound. Many still find the tides of human emotion and political fortunes far more intriguing than inanimate tides found in the orbits and oceans. From what archon do the Tidecaster draw upon their magic? The first Tidecasters were given the gift of magic by our school's founder, occulted Jade, Archon of Tides, though she was not of Kairos' ilk. She was as powerful as any Archon, and from her name and legacy we can mimic the moon's pull on seas and change the currents. And it's from her that we have spells to turn the moon's pleasant hues into a baleful ray of searing gravelight. In all these years I have not grown tired of the thrill of power. It's a rush of carnal humors every time. I'm guessing you could tell me more than I ever wanted to know about the moons. You'd be right. My magic is generally associated with the moon Tyranny's grave. But you have to know where interloper is in the sky when mucking about with mystic forces. It's Tyranny, one of the moons. I could say Tyranny's grave is the big one, right? Tell me about it. Or interloper's the one that moves in the sky, if I remember the lessons correctly. Or lower 40, do you control water, or do you mimic the tidal effects of the moon have on water? I'm going to say that one. It makes me sound smart. Both, actually. I'm amused you're keen on the difference. Our spells of ice and mist affect water directly, but are of limited volume. Displacing your own body weight in water is no mean feat. But if I were to move an ocean current, I'd drive myself nuts pulling water in front of a boat, a little at a time. That's where I'd use a cantrip to simulate a tidal pool. Tyranny's grave is the big one, right? Tell me about it. Tyranny's grave is fixed in the sky, always overhead, day and night. It was first named by folks living far to the east. They look to the west and see the moon like a permanent hill on the horizon, a grave where the sun dies each evening. That's how the older folks saw it. If you live in the western part of the world, Tyranny's grave is overhead all the time. This means that day and night it's reflecting the sun's rays. And if you know what you're doing, it doesn't just reflect, it magnifies. And interloper's the one that moves in the sky, if I remember the lessons correctly. Exactly. Interloper orbits Tyranny at a steady clip, and its orbit sometimes crosses in front of Tyranny's grave, leading to mystical calamity if you don't know what you're doing. Alright, let's talk of something else. Have you heard anything from the Tidecasters that left before the war? No, and I don't like entertaining the hope. Those cowards are all gone. If they didn't die at sea, they're dead to me. I reserve the right to be pleasantly surprised if they come back, eager to fight the good fight. But I'm not holding my breath. All the brave Tidecasters died, present company excepted. Fine, we can talk about other arcane matters.
I normally charge for this, but for you...
Ebb smiles, awaiting your query. Do you know anything of the magic of the Archons? Enough to know I'm out of my element. That is to say, I've studied the many Archons a great deal, and I have a great number of hypotheses and conjectures, but, well, I'm no expert. Yet. And like most who have invoked the archons of times past to work magic, I do wonder what difference of birth or experience gives one the magical potential to be an archon. Most of my studies have been into the question of origins of form. It's known we can emulate the magic of archons that came before us. But is it possible to tap the magic of archons yet to be? So far, the answer seems to be no. She looks to the ground with a rumbled smirk. Do you know anything about the old walls and the spires? Not enough. Never enough. Ebb smiles, twirling her staff in her hands. As a child, I was terrified of the old walls. I think that's true of most folk. Now that I can arc gravelight with a wiggle of my fingers, well, I think when I'm a shriveled old hag, dying in the old walls would be a great way to go. What can you tell me of the Bane? What I know is largely taken from Master Camberill's work and some near-fatal experience venturing close to the old walls. As best I understand it, the Banes are bits of magical will that have an extended life of their own. I'm of the belief that they nest or reproduce in the old walls, the only place you regularly find them. Our magic attracts the Bane. That much I know to be true firsthand. Again, this is personal theory, but I'm guessing they eat or drink magic. So our spells are invitations to dine. Let's change the subjects. Tell me about yourself. What would you like to know? Tell me about your name. Well, I was born Hazen Lavenja. But for most of my life, and I suppose for all the days after, I'm known and will be known as Ebb. Tidecaster Ebb for those trying to be obsequious. I've also probably used a bunch of aliases that are going to haunt me at some point. Hazen didn't realize you were nobility. I know. I dress myself and cook my own food. So misleading. Mother was a magistrate of Arden. Father was admiralty. It's mostly meaningless, though. Our lands are now the overlords. How'd you get the nickname Ebb? It's one of those not especially funny jokes that stuck long past its season. I wrote the word Ebb incorrectly on a written examination. Master Fulvox started calling me Ebb from then on. He claimed it fit me. Said I was a cynical little shit that always sees the ebb, never the flow. Let's change the subject. Did you always want to be a tidecaster? So when I was a little girl, what I really wanted to be was a marine. The burly bitch at the prow of Tyranny. First to crack some skulls when the ship rammed. You know, an honest living. Fortunately, the school sought me out before I got myself killed at sea. The School of Tides was looking for new blood, and my father was an admiral of Haven. So the school wanted me for the political connections. I got to spend my first couple years proving I actually belonged with the Tidecasters. That was fun. What did you do in the years before the war? My husband was born in Apex, and he left his prosperous lands to be with me. So when the nest was empty, it seemed right we leave my homeland and see his side of the tears. We had a year and a bit to ourselves before the war upturned things. We saw all of Apex. I took him along all my old sailing routes around Five Wives and Sunders. Those were good times. Then came the war, and I learned I would be one of the last tearsmen to live free of Kairos. Ever since then, I think Oathbreaker has technically been my chosen profession. Tell me about your family. Ebb loyalty to... Yeah, I guess we succeeded. Trying to salt old wounds? They're all gone, but if you really care to know, I had a husband, 3 kids, siblings I didn't hate. Every family has its troubles. I was lucky that awkward and stilted dinner banter was the worst of it. Tell me about your husband. Palox Aldanos and I were married in 410. Aldanos was a falxman of the Vendrian Guard back before they were starving partisans. But I saw him more as a carpenter. Woodworking was just a hobby of his, but my fondest memories are of him trying to shape something, and me making stupid jokes about the firmness of his materials. What became of him? He perished at the gates of judgment. I saw him die. I do not wish to discuss it. Just know I've made my peace with it, and I'm glad I was with him on the field of battle when his time came. I miss him, but it might have been for the best. Though he was only a few years older than me, my studies left me, always a bit younger than him. The difference grew with time. Eldenos was slowing down and half figured the Gates of Judgment would be his last battle. If anything, he got exactly the death he wanted. So in that sense, I'm very happy for him. What happened to your kids? There were the twins, Drevenor and Lorma, then my youngest son, Akmas. Aldenos wanted more, but I was nearing the end of my trials at the School of Tides, and dueling with lethal magics is a terrible idea when with child. Drevenor and Lorma followed my husband's trade and took the Falks. Akamas liked the harp more than people. Can't blame him one bit. I made sure my children could read, and I'm damn proud of that fact. Probably the only thing I did right. What about the twins? They died at the Gates of Judgment, or at least Drevenor did, run through by a disfavored spear. Lorma was at the battle, but I don't know what became of her. My fear has been she was recruited by the Scarlet Chorus. Perhaps she has a new name, if she's still alive. There were the twins, Drevenor and Lorma, then my youngest son, Akamas. Oh, okay. Same dialogue. What became of your youngest? Without Drevenor and Lorma, Akamas, well, he took his own life in 430. Ebb shrugs, her eyes glancing far away. I should have put him on a trireme and shoved him out onto the high seas. He did not ask for birth, nor did I prepare him for the bitterness that life would offer. There were the twins, Drevenor and Lorma, and my youngest son, Akamas. Aldenos wanted more, but I was nearing the end of my trials at the School of Tides. And dueling with lethal magics is a terrible idea. Why do they repeat that? Why am I reading it? I'm very sorry for your loss. Spare me the sorrow. We've all lost family to Kairos. I just lost 2 in one battle, but even then I'm hardly unique. There were the twins, Drevenor and Lorma, then my youngest son, Akamas. Aldenos wanted... Oh my god. Pete. Okay. What of the rest of your family? My family's Haven folk through and through. My mother prided herself on being descended from a Hazen Rabbin, one of the founding magistrates of the city of Arden. She looks to the side, mouth twisting in thought. Sad thing is, they died during the conquest. But that's not how I lost contact. I lost contact because magic and travel became my life. Had plenty of time to get to know them as an adult, but I simply missed it. But that one's my fault. I can't rightly blame Kairos for everything. Not so sure I believe any of this. You don't seem all that troubled.
Sorry. Did you want more tears from your conquered slaves? I've lost nearly everything during this war, but my story is a fortunate one compared to most.
Alright, let's change the subject. How did you fall in with the Vendrian Guard? What does it matter now that they're gone? They seemed a last hope for the tears, and a ninny shitting fuck of a chance is still more than no chance at all. Let's change the subject. I have questions about the people of the Tears.
We all know how to swim, and we all know how to fight. Most Northmen are lucky to make half that boast. What would you like to know?
I'm curious about the people of the Tears. I think you'll find each of us thinks themselves a child of Haven, or, as in my case, or a child of Azure, child of Apex, or what have you. But I suppose we Tearsmen have our shared customs. The most treasured of those customs used to be the pride of being free of Kairos' rule. When were the Tears settled? Human settlers arrived over 400 years ago, displaced from a war between what are now Kairos' realms of Trevin and Fertile Sands. A flotilla of barely seaworthy rigs headed west across the high seas. Tearsmen will sometimes speak of the 5 wives. We use it to refer both to the first 5 settlements where the colonists made landfall, as well as the 5 matriarchs that went on to form the ruling dynasty of the Tears. Of course, I'm leaving out the matter of the builders of the old walls. Who knows when they lived here and why they're gone. But those old walls didn't just fall out of the sky. Why don't men own the land or women's ships? For centuries it has been our way that the men own the ships, but the women own the harbors. Our customs don't truly prevent ownership, they limit inheritance. Lands pass to daughters, then sisters, then mothers and aunts. Ships pass sons, then brothers, then fathers and uncles. It seems strange to outsiders, but it makes sense to me. Men are blessed with wanderlust, women with a sense of the permanent. Likewise, the captain of a ship can't pause to carry a child, and the men grow restless if left in peace. Place. In truth, the custom varies from place to place, and you'll find men with enough wealth to own land, and women with enough sway own ships. As is often the case, the nobles pick and choose their traditions. Why didn't the younger realms stand united against Kairos? Are you trying to rub it in? Yes, the younger realms were defeated one at a time by the invaders. Maybe if I was queen of the Tears, that wouldn't have happened. I could say, well then, what would Queen Ebb have done? Or, I genuinely want to know your thoughts on the matter, you're being defensive over nothing, or I would have accepted hubris or incompetence as valid answers. What would Queen Ebb have done? I would have taken the threat seriously the moment troops were stopped marching to the gates of judgment. Am I the only person whose mother mentioned that Kairos was a real threat? Opportunity, that's what killed us. Haven wanted to watch the bastard Tyr fall first. Apex was hoping Haven would fall. Azura wanted Stalwart to be attacked first. Every realm of the Tyrs had some interest in watching their neighbors fail first. So we all held back our support until a year or so into the war. Too fucking late by then. Squabbling idiots. Tyrsmen live with greater numbers of beastmen. What's that like? The beastmen of the Tyrs are hardier and smarter than their kin elsewhere. And fortunately, we have lived together in relative harmony for some time. Make no mistake, life is difficult for most beastmen in the Tyrs. But compared to, say, how they are treated in the Northern Empire, I would like to think we Tyrsmen are a bit more modern and forward-thinking, even if just a bit. But I suppose I also take an overly optimistic view of our beastly cousins. I find their clumsy honesty endearing, and while no human will say nice things about my cooking, no beastman has ever said anything mean about my worst dishes. Let's change the subject. What of the major resistors to Kairos' rule?
Aside from the ones you slew, the Vendrian Guard were the most staunch opponents of Kairos. With their passing, the Overlord's rule is absolute. Well, aside from the local Archons being in a state of... Was there a particular group you wish to discuss?
Tell me about the Unbroken.
The Unbroken is the name of the military of the now fallen realm of Stalwart. Every citizen of Stalwart was trained to fight, and all were expected to answer the rallying cry of the Regents, the ruling small council of the realm. A decade ago, Stalwart was the ass end of jokes Tyrsmen would tell each other. The people of Stalwart are obnoxiously proud of a long history of being invaded, but never losing. The disfavored put an end to their vaunted record of victory. The Unbroken still persist, albeit marginally so. The disfavored withdrew after the Edict of Storms began shredding the landscape. Their holdfast of Sentinel Stand Keep was never taken, and the citizen army, though scattered, could still be rallied.
Tell me about the Stonestalker tribe.
Kairos' war was disastrous to the human realm of Azure, but a stroke of good luck for the numerous beastmen that toiled in Azure's endless wheat fields. With the masters all dead, the serfs have been set free. The Stonestalkers are a tribe born from these newly freed beasts. I imagine they would never bow to Kairos or the Archons. Too many generations have been enslaved. I'd wager anything they'll die before they ever bow. Beastmen understand strength and leadership, but it's always in the concrete sense. I can't pretend to know how they think, but I could never imagine them accepting an absent prima. A distant ruler they can't see or smell seems a bit too abstract.
That's cool. Physical leaders only. Tell me more about the Bronze Brotherhood.
The Bronze Brotherhood is one of the most feared and famous of the Free City mercenary kingdoms. They served the highest bidder, and during the war, that was Kairos. Most of the Brotherhood perished in the war, but a handful, the crew hired to work at Luffian's Crossing. They got to babysit the Forge Band and and survived the last few years with minor losses. The band is too small to be a serious threat to the disfavored or the chorus, but they are scourge-worshipping berserks that will adopt any enemy for the right price. Maybe even Kairos.
Are there other remnants of the Younger Realms that could still rise against Kairos?
Several sages came to our aid during the Second Battle of Vengeance Well. I at first thought they meant to kill me, but instead they put their lives on the line for us. They spoke of others in their guild braving the Edict of Fire to salvage lore from the burning library. Though I may find them untrustworthy, it must be said that the sages have a certain fearlessness toward the Overlord. Perhaps it could be kindled further. Historically speaking, an alliance with the School of Ink and Quill is just asking to have your efforts stolen and your goals undermined. Mark my words, some things never change.
I could say, think of the sages as a resource. In that sense, we are not fools to use them. Would you rather they be our enemies, or your concern is noted but irrelevant? If the sages will obey me, I will work with them. I'll ask, would you rather they be our enemies?
Well, perhaps we can shove them in front of the enemy. And the ones that volunteered at Vendrian's Well weren't all bad.
There we go. I kind of moved her towards my side. Let's change the subject. What can you tell me about the different nations of the Tiers? Before Kairos came, the Tiers were the Younger Realms, the Bastard Tier, and the Free Cities, in about that order of prominence. We all trace our roots back to the Five Wives, though sometimes a bit of ancestral shoreline seems all we have in common. Tell me about the Younger Realms. Haven, Azure, Apex, and Stalwart have been the four major forces of the Tiers for the last 4 centuries. A few other dynasties have tried their hand, but all eventually were defeated or absorbed into the 4 we know today. Not sure when the term younger came into fashion, but it's always been a term of humble contrast. Just look at the old walls. Someone that was here before us and built them. Don't know really anything about them, but it stands to reason there used to be an older realms that did all the construction. Before Kairos came, the Tiers were the Younger Realms, the Bastard Tier, and the Free Cities, in about that order of prominence. We all trace our roots back to the Five Wives, though sometimes a bit of ancestral shoreline seems all we have in common. Tell me about the Bastard Tier. It's the northernmost of the Tiers, and the choke point to the Northern Empire. It's been a hub of trade for centuries, and a long line of merchant families and private armies have kept the realm largely lawless. Though many of used to joke about the Bastard City being sacked by rabid dogs, Tunon's capture of the city was a terrible blow to the morale of the Tiersmen. We knew that day Kairos was more than just a fun story to scare your kids. Before Kairos came, the Tiers were the Younger Realms, the Bastard Tier, and the Free Cities. Yeah, that's what we already read. I don't like when they do that. Why? That just doesn't make sense to me. What can you tell me about the Free Cities? There's little free about the Free Cities, save for their independence from the Younger Realms. They are not physically adjacent, but rather politically allied by their shared hatred of other realms. Most all of the Free Cities were defeated with little effort by Kairos' forces. Way I heard it, Nayrat had just to have agents hire up their mercenaries and order them to simply be elsewhere when the armies of the Overlord arrive. Before Kairos came, the Tiers were the Younger Realms, the Bastard Tier. Yeah, let's change the subject.
Ask away.
What can you tell me of the Archons of the Tiers?
Not entirely sure. Which is to say, there was a time I studied my enemy in great detail. But I've recently come to learn that much of my information was little more than lies and misdirection.
What about the voices of Nayrat? The Archon of Secrets lives up to his name. If he weren't so loathsome a beast, I'd half admire his mastery of the magical arts. They say he knows all the sigils lost to history. But I've also heard it said that all stolen knowledge... It said all that stolen knowledge is why he speaks in his different voices. Oh. But I've also heard it said all that stolen knowledge is why he speaks... I still don't think that's right, but whatever. But in truth, I'm learning the most of what I know is just lies and misdirection. Though I guess he'd be a poor Archon of Secrets if I had my facts straight. What do you know of Graven Ash? Before the conquest, I assumed Graven Ash a harmless old man. An Archon in name only, past his prime. I could not have been more wrong. Many have underestimated the great general by his age. Few of them have made the mistake twice, says Barik. Ash is a remarkable general. He's led his tiny band of disfavored on a nearly unstoppable rampage of the Tears, and he does not seem to win his wars with obvious displays of mystic powers, but with old-fashioned leadership and good soldiers. A year or so back, under a blue flag talk with a commander, I was told that the Archon knows the name of every soldier under his command, living and dead. The way the disfavored speak of Ash, you'd think he raised each of them from the cradle. That's cool. She has like a mildly positive opinion of him. Know anything of Karen? Enough. She inhales sharply, folding her arms with a scowl. Why the hostility? The Archon of Stone destroyed much that I hold dear. I'm glad he's dead. What more need I say? What do you know of Siren? She's standing right there. Why not ask the expert? Okay, let's change the subject. What do you know of Arcane Society?
A great deal of the mages of the Tears, or at least their history. Most are dead now. I know a little less about the guilds sworn to Kairos' Archons, but I try to make an effort to know my opposition.
Tell me of the Earthshakers. The Earthshakers are the disciplines of Cairn, Archon of Stone, and they share their master's command of tremors and soil, and they also share Cairn's aloof, brooding temperament. Okay, I just want to point out, let's stop real quick. Ebb is rife with grammatical and spelling errors, or just misplaced words. Like that should have been disciples of Karen. Which tells me that maybe they didn't proofread like enough of hers. Like this part, her dialogue specifically seems like shoehorned in, which is weird, very strange. From what I gather, the Earthshakers serve the disfavored, but the relationship has been deeply strained by Karen's fall from grace. I could imagine there's the fear of Karen shared with them something. I could imagine there's the fear Karen shared with them something subversive or treasonous. Yeah, this is all written very weird. This is very strange. Tell me about Blood Chanters. The Blood Chanters are the voices of Neyrat's cabal of mages. Their magic is taken from the sigil of Siren, and from techniques stolen from the school of Wild Wrath. Namely, their magic of fire as learned from Thousand Embers, Archon of Fire. They barely qualify as the proper school or guild. Most of them barely literate, and I bet most of them didn't learn a damn thing. Just had their knowledge, shoved in their heads by Neyrat. They've all the brutal buffoonery of the chorus, but with the magic to make their bloodlust contagious. Their only redeeming feature, guess they make the sages seem not half bad. What can you tell me of the Forgebound? The Forgebound have an unusual sort of magic. They specialize in slow, painstaking rituals that do not produce the dazzling blasts of energy and shards of flying ice like my own magic. Instead, their spells render them immune to the fires of the forge and at one with their tools of the trade. I admit a bit of fascination with the guild. I much prefer the power and brutality of my own magic. But if I lived in a calmer, wiser time, I think there could be great satisfaction in using magic to become a master of one's own craft. Tell me about the School of Ink and Quill. Behind the Tidecasters, the sages of the School of Ink and Quill are the second oldest arcane institution in the Tears. We go way back a ways. There's a lot of bad blood. If I'm being objective, the sages claim to be scholars interested in collecting, archiving, and preserving lore from all, and for all humanity. They're quite keen to gather lore, but in no sense do they seek to share their knowledge with the Tearsmen. Many of our secrets have been pilfered by sages' spies over the centuries, and we're not alone. The sages have the secrets of many other guilds. Their generations of theft have made them versatile and dangerous. Tell me about your own guild, the School of Tides. Our patron, occulted Jade, Archon of Tides, is as old as the settlers of the Five Wives, and for nearly 5 centuries we were masters of the coasts and rivers. These days, it's a school of one. You're looking at it. She thumps her chest with a bemused smirk. Why didn't your Archon fight in the war? About a year or so before the troops arrived in the Bastard Tier, occulted Jade proclaimed the age of the Tiers was over, and said she'd depart southwest, into unknown, unending ocean rather than face Kairos. Most of my guidelines went along, choosing to risk the endless high seas rather than risk battle. A few of us, the militants, as our peaceful brethren dubbed us, choose to stand and fight. To my knowledge, I am the last of those who decided to stay and fight. Can I get more out of that? Yeah. What was your school like before the war? There was a time when the Tidecasters were the most powerful guild of the Tiers. The Kingdom of Haven accepted us as defenders of sea trade, and the noble houses gave us peace and quiet in exchange for teaching their sons and daughters music, writing, and navigation. Though the other schools coveted our knowledge, they feared our wrath. Between our destructive magic and our Archon patron, others knew that attacking us meant suicide. How did the school fail? The Archon Karen issued a challenge, and Masters Fulvax, Hagravar, and Camberell left at the chance. I told them it was a hopeless clash. I think they were ready to die. As the youngest Tidecaster still in the Tiers, I exercised the better part of valor and went into hiding. But then my sense of shame kicked in, and, well, that's about when I fell in with the Vendrian Guard. Old as the Five Wives? By all accounts, occulted Jade was amongst the initial settlers that made landfall in the Tiers before Kairos first cast an edict. Though she's a bit old and stooped, she looked amazing for nearly 500. Let's change the subject.
I know a great deal of the mages of the Tiers, or at least their history. Most are dead now. I know a little less about the guilds sworn to Kairos' Archons, but I try to make an effort to know my opposition.
What of the other magical schools and guilds of the Tiers? There have been several to crop up and wither across the centuries. The Cutter's Guild took their healing magic north centuries ago. The School of Flowering Winter always limped along as inconsequential group of gardeners. Most other schools in the Tiers fizzled out early, slain by suspicious neighbors or subverted and destroyed by one of the big 3 schools. Let's change the subject. I'd like to ask you about our travel companions. She nods, silently awaiting your follow-up. What do you make of Barik?
My one concern with Barik is that he's still loyal to Graven Ash and not to you. Barik seems steadfast, faithful, and dependable. But if it comes down to you versus Graven Ash, therein lies the test.
If it weren't a tactical asset, it'd be fun to try and pry him out of that suit. Curious to see if his midsection is as strong, firm, and taut as I've imagined it should be. She nods, silently awaiting her. What about Verse?
We should consider ourselves fortunate that one of the most deadly members of the Scarlet Furies considers you a suitable gang leader. That said, I think her involvement with you is entirely suspect. I would wager good money the voices of Neratis listening through her, or perhaps seeing what she sees.
I think we already know he
If I were
is.
you, I would keep a close eye on Verse. If she wanted to kill you, she could have done it already. But I can't help shake the feeling that she's part of some long ploy with the Archon of Secrets.
What's your take on Lantry?
Probably the only word thief I haven't wanted to dismember. Him, I'd merely flay with an ice knife.
The Wandering Scholar thing seems an act. It's always an act with the sages, always pretending to know less than they really do. I'm sure he's got 1,000 reasons for why he's not like them, or more trustworthy than the rest, but I know his type, and so I don't trust him. Oh, that's high praise coming from you. I'm going to take this staff and repeatedly jam it into your backside until you prolapse. Ah, just like that. Balance is restored to all known existence. You had me worried there. What do you make of Siren?
We've all heard legends of child Archons, but Siren is the real thing. She's so very jaded for her age. And but I'd be a sour ninny shitter too if I had a contraption stuck on my head limiting my greatness. I'll tell you this much. Her hatred of the voices of Narad is either genuine or a most fantastic act. But being a giant liar, I know another liar when I see one. And I'd wager this gripe is sincere.
I'm well aware that she may have already said something to me to make me more comfortable with her presence. And if she did, how would I know she is influencing me or not? If she is playing me, I applaud how well she's doing it. Okay, let's change the subject. Let's talk of something
What is
else.
it you need?
Is that it? That's all? Okay. Let's return to our travels. Okay, and last thing to handle today is let's talk to Lantry.
Your latest acquisition has me thinking about the spires some more. By all accounts, they go as far back as the old walls. Over the centuries, the nobles of the tiers have claimed the spires, but they've only ever battled over the land at the ground level of the monuments. I've never seen the glyphs of a spire light up in all my years. Not until you show up. If this were an isolated incident, I'd be confused. But it seems the spires, plural, are somehow connected to you. What's your secret?
I could say it is a surprise to me as well, or I've studied at Tunon's feet, proclaimed edicts, broken them too. I'm sure I've been exposed to all sorts of arcane powers, or perhaps Tunon or one of the Archons did something to me. It's a surprise to me as well. A long sigh escapes Lantry as he sticks his quill in his mouth, chewing on the tip. His head tilts from one side to the other, muttering, inchoate half-words? Look that one up. I always want to know what you're thinking.
My mind is going back to Ascension Hall. I wonder if Gravenash or Narot had claimed it as their own, would the spire come alive for either of them the way it did for you?
I could say, probably, so I'll count my good fortune it was me. Or use subterfuge, 45, and say, the Edict of Execution was pushing for someone to claim Ascension Hall. Can't be coincidence. Or the monument was meant for me. I think I'm going to use the subterfuge.
Such a clever child. I can't imagine the Overlord would ever carelessly word an edict. You are right. I don't imagine Kairos leaves anything to mere coincidence.
I could say, do you think the spires are connected to Kairos in some fashion? Yeah, I'll say that.
If you're asking if Kairos built them or controls them, no. They predate all mention of Kairos, and I'm sure if Kairos could control the other spires, that fact would be shamelessly flaunted. But it occurs to me that perhaps Kairos didn't have a connection, but does now, thanks to your actions.
Oh, that's interesting. So I could have given Kairos access to the spires, which could be good if Kairos is good. We're still not sure if Kairos is good because he's always waging war. Okay. Are there stories of awakened spires elsewhere in Terratus?
There are other spires, and I've heard of notable figures trying to build monuments atop or astride the spires. But nothing I've read matches the mystical connection you've made with the spire.
Can we talk about other stuff? You
Of
have
course. How can I help?
know anything about the region we're in?
The spires predate us all. As far as I know, we're the only ones who've been up here since... ever? I think this might be a first. Perhaps the real Trailblazer had trouble getting down and was lost to history. Of course. How can I help? The spires predate... Of course. How can I help?
I wonder why it's still up. You're taking lots of notes. What about?
All kinds of things. My mind is old. Memory's a sieve. Keeping track of you. Noting what I hear of the war. Scribbling down reminders to myself. That sort of thing.
That's kind of suspicious. Is it safe to be writing out your arms that much?
No, certainly not. But it depends on the ink I'm using. Too much cerulean and I can't sleep. But just the right amount and I can write all night. The red ink will give you swamp on it if you drink it, but absorbed through the skin, it'll make you taste colors and smell music. Speaking of which, I should change out my tip.
Is he shooting heroin?
I use 3 kinds. Sepia, cerulean, and a red that's never the same shade. My recipe needs work. I like having 3 colors, but they also provide different states of mind for writing.
Are you spying on me?
Well, yes. If I'm worth my weight in tin as a craftsman of record, future generations will know of you. So yes, the Archon of Posterity sent me. You seem troubled by something that ought to be an honor.
Your ink sound like fun. Can I try them?
I can't in good conscience poison you.
Consider it a lesson. Cautionary tale about wishing for things. Fatherly moment. Any of those work for you? If it's really going to bother you, forget it. I won't bring it up again. Yeah, I'll say that.
For you to understand. If I were to melt your brain with amateur alchemy, I'd be doing history a disservice.
I'm not going to say I don't like the idea of you recording me, because I do. And I don't want to say that I'm breaking my own rules, and I don't care. Is that it?
Nothing if not a semi-reliable font of knowledge. I know every... Of course. How can I help?
Yeah, that's it. Okay. Let's get in here and save this. Boom. Those are some long convos. Does time advance when I do that? It looks like it did. It definitely looks like it did. So time actually moves by as I'm having those conversations, it seems. Okay, so we had a conversation with Ebb, and we learned more about the tiers. And we had a conversation with Lantry and kind of talked to him about what he's recording and stuff. Yeah, so that's everybody we can have a conversation with up here. So next episode, we will adventure out to meet with the voice of Nayrat and like advance the quest line a little bit. I had fun learning more about Ebb, though. Interesting character. Last of the school tides. Everybody in her family died as far as she knows. God, tragic story, really. And she does not trust Nayrat, as she shouldn't. And I don't know why I do, but I'm going for it. So thank you so much for watching. Check out our podcast, Mandate Radio. Check out our website, IndieGamesAAA.com. Check out my review channel, Base Fake Reviews. And I will see you next time on another edition of P Plays Tyranny. Goodbye.